Juneteenth is June 19th. It marks the day, June 19th, 1865, when the federal troops finally made it to Galveston, Texas, and communicated to the remaining slaves that they were freed as a result of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation was signed on September 22nd, 1862, and enacted on January 1st, 1863. It took almost 2.5 years, or just about 2.5 years, to communicate to all the enslaved Black people that they were free. And that doesn't even start to address the challenges that we face with Reconstruction or the subsequent persecution of Black people in this country following our freedom. And so we wanted to be able to ground ourselves in the importance of Juneteenth and why it's significant. You talked a little bit about, the reduction in low-level arrests and things like that. But can you talk a little bit about some of the successes that you've seen in crisis response, the success of crisis response in places like Colorado, and maybe what policymakers in Washington can learn from what's happening there in a place like that?
Yeah, so first of all, the crisis response, in particular programs that are not co-responder models, but are like civilian mental health providers responding to mental health crises and not the police. Those programs tend to have been relatively newly implemented. So many of them were implemented in 2020 in response to the protests. There are some programs that have been around longer. The Cahoots program, Eugene, Oregon, is sort of like the granddaddy program that everybody talks about. And there is some initial data that has come out from both the Cahoots program and some of the initial pilots in places like Denver, like the STAR program, that actually suggest and indicate that those programs are remarkably effective, not only in sort of reducing police violence, reducing policing in general. So you look at the STAR program, where the initial program evaluation showed that they responded to about 750 mental health calls and used no force, didn't arrest anybody, and instead connected people to services, which is very different from the police.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. The thing that's really important to know about the murder of Manny Ellis was that under the rules of our recently passed Initiative 940, that entire investigation was illegally handled, right? Okay. That entire investigation, and we're learning things as we go along. We made some assumptions initially, and some of our assumptions were that officers of the law would follow the law as they were passed. In Initiative 940, though it was illegal for police departments to investigate themselves in their own murder investigations, they chose to do it anyway. Tacoma was, quite candidly, a pretty big offender. After 940 passed, they had 3 other cases that they should not have investigated themselves, and yet they did. And so what we've learned is that even if somebody is an officer of the law, there still needs to be the appropriate punishments, teeth in place to ensure that they follow the law.
And also that this should have never been historic.
Right.
The reality is that this needs to have been the standard all the way along. And where we're at is that they're historic. Yeah. And what does that say? And what is the impact of that? And what does that point to about the direction, about the momentum that we've come into this space from, and the direction that we're going to go from here, and the impacts on our communities of color to have to be the ones to not only be disproportionately harmed by all of this and basically gunned down at will across the nation, but now to be the champions of the ones of holding this particular section and multiple other sections of the system accountable.
Question, particularly in King County and Pierce County, there are calls to have the sheriff resign, and just wanting to open up the space for folks to ask, what should folks know about those cases, or is there any important information that folks need about those things specifically, about those particular sheriffs?
The long story short, they've betrayed the trust of the community. They've betrayed the trust of the communities that they serve. And if you do not have the trust of the communities you serve, you cannot serve. You are not a sheriff of a specific group of people. You are supposed to be a sheriff protecting the safety of all. And what both have demonstrated is that they do not care for all of the communities that they serve. So they should no longer serve. there is a minimum standard
Right.
of service to community, and they have not met it yet. And so we have to call on their resignations. If there is no consequences, it will continue to happen. It will continue to occur. And so we really need to begin to hold folks accountable and say, just because you got elected for 4 years, you have not earned the right to serve those 4 years. You need to step down.
I agree. And even looking at the process in which the fact that our sheriff is elected, whereas, why not the same as with the police chief, where they are interviewed, they're vetted, they're investigated, as opposed to the popular vote, as opposed to, campaign and who is endorsing you, whether or not you get the job. It's a matter of life and death, and it's not being treated as such.
Before we head out, I just want to give you all some resources and some things to be able to take with you. First and foremost, there are 4 demands from the Ellis family that have been shared by the Tacoma Action Collective in the wake of these indictments. And the first of those is having Attorney General Bob Ferguson direct the Department of Justice to investigate the Tacoma Police Department and the Pierce County Sheriff Department. The second is the immediate firing of all officers involved in the arrest of Manuel Ellis. Immediate is the key word there. Third, that all personnel files of the officers engaged on the scene, that all the personnel files of the officers engaged on the scene to be made public, right? So all their files needs to be made public. So we need to see their history of policing, right? And then the removal of City Manager Elizabeth Pauley for failing to hold the Tacoma Police Department accountable. And so if you can at least take those 4 things and help to support the Ellis family as they continue to push these 4 objectives, and the Tacoma Action Collective, because these are the things that will, that are so significant, and by the request of the family to be able to help, move forward in the face of this tragedy. Also, along the same lines, in King County, following the sheriff's actions in the Tommy Lee case, the community has continued to demand that King County Sheriff also resign. All the resources like the police scorecard and the accountability loopholes in the police union contracts can be found on our website, WashingtonForBlackLives.org. We'll throw it right up there on time. And if you want to support our work, we love for you to contribute using the donate button on our website. Thank you again so much for all of you joining us tonight. There was a lot of information, a lot of it heavy, a lot of it deep, and we just want to continue to have you all help us move the work forward. And so happy Juneteenth to you all, and let's stay active, let's stay strong. Have a good night, everybody.